Under the bright lights of CNN's live town hall, something unexpected happened. What started as a normal conversation about criminal justice suddenly turned into a moment that millions would watch again and again. The energy in the room changed. Fast. Judge Judy raised her voice. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. And in the next few minutes, the world watched a calm, quiet takedown that would go viral across every major platform. Judge Judy, 81 years old, sat tall and confident. For decades, she's been the face of tough justice on TV. Her sharp replies, strict tone, and no-nonsense style made her one of the most watched courtroom figures in history. People knew her as the woman who didn't tolerate excuses. She built her career by demanding personal responsibility and showing that actions always have consequences. To many, she stood for order, tradition, and control. Across from her sat someone very different. Jasmine Crockett, 43, is a congresswoman from Texas. Before politics, she was a civil rights lawyer. She didn't rise through fame or TV. She built her career by standing up for people in real courtrooms. Her style is calm, thoughtful, and clear. She's known for staying steady in intense situations and using facts to make her case. She's part of a new wave of leaders who speak up about injustice and believe in changing the system, not just enforcing it. This was more than a debate between two women. It was a clash between two completely different ways of seeing justice. On one side, a famous judge who believes in the rules as they are. On the other, a rising politician who believes those rules need to change. It wasn't just about age or experience. It was about two ideas of what fairness really means in America. The real heat began when Judge Judy felt challenged. Her voice got louder. Her words got sharper. But Crockett didn't match her tone. She stayed quiet, focused, and waited for the right moment to respond. What she said next stopped the entire room. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was smart, direct, and impossible to ignore. What happened in those few minutes didn't just stay in the studio. Within hours, clips flooded Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Hashtags trended, memes exploded. Millions watched, shared, and commented. People couldn't stop talking about it, not because of shouting, but because of how one woman stayed in control, without ever raising her voice. Before we dive into what happened next, take a second to like this video and hit subscribe. This wasn't just a heated debate, it was a moment that changed careers and sparked a bigger conversation about power, truth, and justice. Let's break down the face-off that left everyone speechless. The tension didn't start with shouting. It started with a simple question. Anderson Cooper turned to both women and brought up one of the most debated topics in American justice. Why are people from black and brown communities given longer sentences for the same crimes as others? He asked about the numbers behind drug-related charges. Specifically, how punishment seems to hit certain communities much harder than others. Jasmine Crockett leaned in and answered calmly. Her voice was steady. Her words were clear. She didn't need to guess, she had seen it firsthand. She talked about how mandatory sentencing laws often hit poor and minority communities the hardest. She pointed out that the data shows a pattern, a system that doesn't treat everyone equally. Justice isn't blind, she said, looking directly at the camera. It sees color when we look at outcomes, not intentions. That line hit hard, and Judge Judy didn't like it. She straightened in her seat. Her fingers started tapping the table. Then she cut in. Her voice was sharper now. "Excuse me," she said, waving off Crockett's words. "I've been in courtrooms for over 30 years. Justice sees behavior, not skin color. If you do the crime, you do the time. That's not racism. That's responsibility." Her tone wasn't just firm, it was cold, and it made the room shift. Crockett didn't interrupt. She didn't raise her voice. She waited for Judy to finish. Then she spoke, still calm, still measured. She quoted numbers, real ones. Black defendants receive sentences that are, on average, 19% longer than white defendants for the same crimes, she said. That's not opinion. That's a fact. Judge Judy's face tightened. "Statistics can be twisted," she snapped. "What I saw in my courtroom were people making choices, good or bad. That's on them. I treated everyone the same." But Crockett pushed back, slowly and clearly. She explained that it's not about ignoring crime. It's about recognizing why some groups are punished more than others, even when the behavior is the same. "I'm not making excuses," she said. "I'm asking why a black teenager with a joint gets 5 years, while a white college student with cocaine gets community service." At this point, the tension was clear. Judge Judy's voice grew louder. Crockett's didn't change. Instead of shouting back, she let the silence sit between them. She let Judy's anger fill the space. She kept her focus, using her stillness as power. Around them, the audience began to react. Some nodded at Judy's tough stance. Others leaned into Crockett's quiet reasoning. Anderson Cooper looked uncomfortable. He tried to step in to guide the conversation back, but he couldn't stop what was coming. Then Judy crossed the line. She leaned forward, pointed, and said, "You've been in Congress for 5 minutes and think you understand justice better than someone who's lived it for 3 decades. Her voice was full of frustration, almost mocking. "You learned all this in textbooks. I lived it. I've seen it all. Thousands of cases. You're new. You don't know how the real world works." The room went completely quiet. It wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was personal. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She sat up a little straighter. She gave a small, polite smile. Then she spoke in the same respectful tone she'd used from the beginning. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she said clearly, using the title not just out of politeness, but as a subtle challenge. "Have you ever asked why certain communities show up in your courtroom more than others?" Judge Judy didn't pause. "Because those communities commit more crime," she replied. Without hesitation, that answer changed the energy instantly. It didn't feel like experience anymore. It felt like judgment. Unfair, automatic, and final. Crockett didn't react right away. She let that line hang in the air. She gave it space to breathe. Space for everyone in the room, and everyone watching, to feel the weight of it. Then she spoke, slowly and clearly. "What you call experience," she said, "I call selective judgment." The conflict had gone beyond data and debate. It was now a fight between two worldviews. Judge Judy had her decades of courtroom stories. Jasmine Crockett had the numbers, the cases, and the lives she had defended. One saw justice as something that never changed. The other saw justice as something that had to evolve. And even though no one had yelled at Crockett, the whole world could see it. She was being challenged, dismissed, and talked down to. But she wasn't backing off. She was just getting started. The studio was completely still. You could hear the quiet hum of the lights overhead. Judge Judy sat back in her chair, arms crossed. Her face calmed. It was the kind of calm that came from confidence. The kind that said, "I've already won this." Jasmine Crockett didn't rush. She leaned in slightly, her hands folded, her eyes focused. No anger, no shakiness. Just patience. The kind that comes from knowing exactly what to say, and when to say it. Then she began. Her voice was even and steady. She didn't raise it. She didn't look around for approval. She spoke as if she were in court again, presenting a case she had already won. "I've defended young men who got 15 years in prison for stealing a wallet," she said. 15 years. And then I watched another teenager. Same crime, same age, different skin color. He walked away with 3. She paused, letting it sink in. And when addiction hit poor neighborhoods, it was called criminal. But when it hit wealthy suburbs, it was called a health crisis. Judge Judy shifted in her seat, but said nothing. Crockett wasn't finished. She kept her tone formal, but personal. "Your Honor," she said, with quiet force, "you said you've seen a lot from your bench. I believe that. But I've seen what happens in front of the bench. I've seen mothers lose their children to a system that treats them like they're already guilty. I've seen families torn apart, not because someone was dangerous, but because they were poor. And I've had to look those people in the eye and tell them the law wasn't going to protect them this time." Then she delivered the first direct blow. "The difference between us is simple," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "You passed judgment. I fought for justice." She didn't look away. Judge Judy's face didn't move, but something in her eyes changed. That line cracked through her image, the idea that she was always fair, always right, always in control. But Crockett wasn't there to embarrass her. She was there to tell the truth. "You didn't build a courtroom," she said. "You built a show. One where yelling replaced real understanding. Where pain became a punchline. Where you made a career out of people who didn't have the power to fight back." Then came the moment. Crockett sat up straighter, locked eyes with her, and said, in the coldest, calmest voice of the entire night, "Being tough on people who can't fight back isn't strength, it's bullying. And I don't get intimidated by bullies no matter how famous they are." The room went still again. Judge Judy didn't say a word. Anderson Cooper glanced from one woman to the other, but even he seemed unsure if he should speak. All around them, you could sense something had shifted. Cameras zoomed in on Judy's face. She looked smaller, not angry, not smug, just silent. The kind of silence that doesn't come from winning. And then it started on phones, on Twitter, on TikTok. Clips of that moment spread like wildfire. 10 seconds of calm words that carried more weight than any shout. The world didn't need to wait for the end of the show. It had already seen enough. Back in the studio, Judy tried to respond. Her voice was softer now, less sure. She mentioned experience again. She tried to explain herself, but the sharp edge in her tone was gone. The force behind her words had faded. Crockett had taken the air out of the room, and there was no getting it back. And still, she didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply shifted the conversation back to what mattered. "I'm not here for a moment," she said. "I'm here for the people who don't get a camera when their lives are being destroyed. For every person who's been told the system is fair while watching it fail them over and over." Her voice didn't break. It didn't even waver. But the message landed harder than anything shouted across a table ever could. She talked about the kids who never make it to college, because they're locked up before they even finish high school. About mothers working 3 jobs and still getting evicted, about families punished for addiction instead of helped. She spoke for the ignored, for the invisible, and for everyone who has been told justice is blind only to watch it look away when it mattered most. By the time she stopped talking, no one in that room could deny what had just happened. The control had shifted. The spotlight had moved. Judge Judy, who had built her image on being the loudest, the strongest, the final voice in the room, had been completely, methodically, and calmly dismantled. Not by volume, not by force, but by truth. The moment the show cut to commercial, the internet lit up like a fire. Within minutes, the hashtag Jasmine destroys Judy was trending not just in the US, but worldwide. That single, quiet line, "I don't get intimidated by bullies, no matter how famous they are," turned into a viral soundbite. People clipped it, shared it, and turned it into memes that spread across TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram faster than anyone could keep up. On TikTok, edits of the moment appeared with dramatic music, slow zooms, and captions like "Calm is a superpower." Reaction videos flooded YouTube. On Twitter, side-by-side photos showed Judge Judy's confidence opening next to her silent, stunned face at the end. One post read, "How it started versus how it ended." Late-night shows picked it up almost instantly. One host joked, "Judge Judy's gavel has officially been replaced with a mic because it just got dropped." News outlets were quick to respond to. The Washington Post called it a masterclass in calm confrontation, highlighting how Crockett stayed grounded even when the room was full of tension. The New York Times ran a headline that read, "New faces, new rules, the changing voice of American justice." Even Fox News, usually critical of Crockett's side of politics, had to admit that her control and clarity were impressive. Some tried to defend Judge Judy, but the moment had already taken on a life of its own. It wasn't just the media. Universities noticed too. Professors in law schools, debate clubs, and even business schools began using clips from the town hall to teach how to stay calm under pressure. Some instructors even built entire lessons around how Crockett stayed focused, used facts, and never once got pulled into an emotional trap. For Jasmine Crockett, the impact was huge. Overnight, her team reported a wave of donations from people across the country, many of whom said they'd never even heard of her until that clip. News outlets lined up interviews. Supporters called her a fresh voice in politics, someone who could not only stand her ground, but do it with class and confidence. For Judge Judy, it was the first time in decades she wasn't in control of the room. Her team rushed to clean things up, releasing statements about how she respected all viewpoints, and had simply been passionate about justice. But questions started rising. Was her way of speaking still relevant in 2025? Did yelling still work when the other person stayed completely calm? Even some longtime fans began to quietly step back. Not because they suddenly disliked her, because they saw something different that night. They saw a woman who once owned the room, suddenly lost in it. What this moment captured wasn't just a personal win or loss. It was a shift, a generational shift, a style shift, a shift in how power is shown on live TV. Crockett didn't win because she was louder. She won because she was smarter, more prepared, and never let emotion blur her point. Calm beat rage, facts beat feeling, respect beat noise. And in that studio, on that night, a new kind of leadership showed up, not with shouting or force, but with quiet, clear truth. Sometimes, the strongest voice is the one that stays still when everything else is loud. And sometimes, the most Powerful answer doesn't come with a shout, it comes with a steady look and a sentence that leaves the room in silence. Let us know what you thought of Jasmine's response in the comments. And if you want more moments like this real, raw, and powerful, don't forget to subscribe.